Now, for more on this topic, I'm now joined by Professor Sunwoo Young, a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Konkuk University. Professor Sunwoo is also the president of the Korean Society for Atmospheric Environment. It's good to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So, as you just heard in that report, President Moon stressed the importance of tackling the fine dust pollution and said it needs to be treated like a natural disaster. But before we go into how we might tackle this issue, can you explain to us what this fine dust pollution is and how severe it's getting?
Yeah, I'm sure the public already has heard this, again and again. But in 2015, the World Health Assembly declared air pollution as the most dangerous environmental health risk factor in the world. 7 million deaths per year occur because of this air pollution, 4.3 million with indoor pollution, and 3.7 million outdoor pollution. A lot of this, when we talk about indoor pollution and stuff, people tend to think it's a developing country problem. But there's also a statistic that came from 2016, where in the United States, there was 130,000 people had premature deaths because of air pollution. So it's a very significant problem. Obviously, in our country also, it's very severe at this moment.
Very severe, and actually South Korea just this last week saw record high levels of fine dust pollution.
Right.
Does that mean it's getting worse here in South Korea?
Even when China talked about episodes where they were responsible and not responsible, we don't want to talk about just single events. And there's going to be a lot of fluctuation. People need to be a little patient when they deal with these problems. But the weather is a significant factor. So, with climate, for example, when people talk about climate change, you have a hot summer, people get all worried about climate change. And then if you have a cold summer, then people just kind of forget about it. Well, air pollution and fine dust pollution is also very, it's a function of how the weather acts. So again, there's going to be a lot of fluctuation. I wouldn't just say because of one day or one event that it's getting worse, but it is still a severe problem. Yeah.
But it is true that this is a trend that South Korea has really been seeing over the last few years. It's getting more severe, no?
Yes, but when you say trend, and I'm being a scientist, you have to have a sample size that's quite large. We've only started officially measuring PM 2.5 since 2015. So that's only 4 years. To have a trend based on 4 years is what they call academically statistically insignificant. But there is a definite problem. In Korea, it's not getting any better. With all these measures that are being undertaken, people want to see results right now. The president wants to see results right now, but it's not happening to their satisfaction. So yes, we still have to, it's a big worry right now, yes.
Let's talk about the source of the problem, because many, especially here in Korea, there are they say China is to blame because of their pollution and how fine dust pollution, how it gets blown all the way into South Korea as well. Actually, then, how much is China to blame in your estimation?
That's the million-dollar question, basically, and everybody's kind of worried about that right now. Earlier this month, the Chinese government made some announcements how that Seoul's air pollution was not due to them, and it was Seoul's own problem that was causing the problem. Well, without a doubt, China is making a contribution to the Korea air pollution problem. How much of a percentage that is up for scientific debate. On average, they say it's about 50 to 60%. But we can say definitely for sure that these events that occur, that's, very high concentration events that occur, it has a lot to do with input from China. So that does not mean that we can't do anything domestically. We have a lot of things that we can still work at. But again, it is a significant problem, the input from China.
The Chinese officials, as we said, you've mentioned, has said it's not China to blame, but South Korea's to blame. But then actually, how much is South Korea's own issues and own actions that we're taking contributing to the fine dust pollution problem?
No, it's quite significant. We have some significant sources that we always talk about, coal-fired power plants, diesel cars. President Moon talked about thinking outside the box. When politicians talk about stuff like that, I get very queasy because then everybody underneath, in the lower echelons of government start to think outside the box and start to come up with something very different and radical. Well, I keep saying when I go to these meetings that we have to do we have to actually enforce what's already been done. So we have all these policies, all these regulations that are not being enforced 100%. So if we do what we already set out to do, that will take care of a lot of the problem. But then it's not a very sexy answer, basically, you know. So people always talk about making new things, discovering new ideas. But that's not always the best answer. Sometimes you have to do what you already know is being done properly.
So as you said, President Moon has called for creativity because it seems to be that the measures that are being taken, you're saying, aren't being enforced enough. What are some of these measures and why are they not being forced?
Well, environmental issues usually need some sacrifice. You can't have it both ways. You can't have solutions to environmental problems without trying to, work at it or having some sacrifice. And I think the Korean people right now are not at that stage where they're willing to sacrifice a lot for the solution to these problems. For example, we know a lot of the problems come from like diesel cars. If we wanted to do something drastic, the odd, even kind of things for the car, license plate numbers or something, of course it's drastic. The public's going to complain. Politicians are not going to get votes, basically. So it's not a very popular topic, but people, the government, state governments, local, national governments, you have to have that mentality of sacrifice, and it's still not that prevalent.
But if, as you say, perhaps we're not willing to sacrifice, maybe the solution is to find some sort of outside-the-box thinking. I mean, especially as well, South Korea, this week, in a couple of days' time, they're about to test an artificial rain initiative where they send a plane out and they cause rain to happen. And it seems to be at the moment in some sort of initial stages of this plan to go ahead. But do you think those kind of outside-the-box thinking, kind of unconventional, creative ways could help fix some of these problems that we're seeing?
Well, being a scientist, I don't rule out anything that I haven't done. So I welcome the effort of trying to do something new, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. The thing is, when we talk about the atmosphere, sometimes people forget about how vast it is, three-dimensionally. When you go on a plane, you see how vast the atmosphere is. Well, when they did the artificial rain experiment for Beijing, for the Olympics and stuff, that's one city. This is not just a Seoul problem, right? It's the entire Korea problem. Trying to do something with artificial rain for the entire country, the volume of air is just tremendous, and that's why I'm very pessimistic about something like this. Again, there might be some new ideas, new equipment, new technologies that might not have been looked into that well. I welcome that. Outside the box, okay. But again, a lot of the government officials start to go just into the new ideas and not into enforcing what's already been done. And I think that's where the problem can occur.
But then we go back to this other issue as well, because you say, South Korea perhaps has not been doing enough. But actually, if you say the statistics you mentioned earlier, that's only half the problem, because the other half is still in China. So what do we have to do? We have to continue working with China. And I understand we're holding currently working level talks with Beijing officials to try and tackle some of these issues. But what needs to be done with China to tackle that problem as well from that side?
Well, it's a very sensitive issue, but I think the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that China is doing a lot for themselves. Obviously, it's a very significant problem in China. They have to protect their own people, so they're doing a lot of things. And it's a very forceful government, let's say, that they can do a lot of things that a lot of the other countries in the advanced world cannot. But let me give you an analogy where, I don't know if this is the perfect analogy, but since being a professor, I talk about students in classes a lot. If there's a student who has a high IQ and he's not studying, and he places ranking-wise about 28th out of 30th, if he starts to study, going from 28th to 5th is not a very difficult issue for him. Okay? But going from 5th to 2nd in the class, it's going to be very difficult. I don't know if you got the analogy, but China right now, they've reduced their air pollution emissions significantly. 40% some say, and some other percentages. Okay, that's the easy part. Okay, going from there to where we are at, or where the United States is at, that's going to be where it's difficult. So I think that's where we can have some real international cooperation. And China can benefit from not only our knowledge, but from the world, the world community and what they've done. For example, in Europe, they've already done air pollution treaties We don't have anything of the sort in Asia. That's something we can always think about.
You cite this statistic saying that China has, in certain regions, improved their air quality by as much as 40% since 2013. Is there real evidence towards that number? Because sometimes when we hear China say these statistics, we wonder if it's government saying these optimistic numbers, or whether there's actual scientific proof, as you say, as you're a scientist.
Yeah, most of our data about China comes from China. So either you trust them or you don't. But again, there are other evidences that sort of validate their statements. And, they have to do it. I mean, they have to protect their own people, like I said. So you can see that all these policies and all these governmental regulations are coming into effect. And they're going to help us down the line. It's just not fast enough and not big enough right now for the Korean community.
And actually, how bad is the air pollution in China when we talk about their pollution problems?
Oh, it's quite significant. When you talk about air pollution rankings, they have a significant number of cities that are in the top 50. India is a little more polluted, but again, China, depending on thinking about their GDP and their ranking economically, it's still very significant. Yeah.
I mean, if I compare to Korea, we're seeing these fine dust pollution problems, but you're saying China is much significantly worse.
Oh, much worse, much worse. And the thing is, our average, annual average, and I didn't get much time to talk about the technicalities of that, but the annual average is kind of staying still or going down a little bit. The problem with us is the daily episodes. When you have going above 35, going above 75, and so forth. In China, the annual average is much more, about 3 times more than ours. So again, it's much more significant. They are coming down significantly, but they're going to have to do a lot for their own community, and hopefully we'll be benefiting down the line also.
And then finally, so we are having these talks with Beijing at the moment to try and tackle some of these issues. What do you hope these come out of these talks? And looking ahead, I mean, you've talked a little bit about treaties. What more would you like to see South Korea do to try and tackle these issues?
Yeah, there's this, as you know, there's this Korean saying that, starting is kind of halfway done. So I welcome the communication. I mean, the attempt to talk about it, I think, is very important. But if you recall, when we had problems with North Korea, for example, and this, I don't know if this is a real great analogy, but when we had the problems with North Korea, when it's difficult to talk one-on-one, we had the 6-party talks, right, with Russia, China, and Japan, and so forth. Well, I think we need a little help from the international community as well. It's really kind of touchy to talk one-on-one. We're thinking they're the antagonists and we're the receptor of that antagonism. Well, the international community has a lot of experience. Europe, United States, and there's a lot of academicians, a lot of regulators that know this problem. And to bring them into the fold, to bring them into our communication, I think will help tremendously with this effort.
And finally, we're talking about this fine dust pollution, but as you said, in Korea, we've only been looking at it from 2015, taking measurements. But this fine dust pollution, it seems to be something that's really popped up in the last few years. Am I wrong here? And also, outside of Korea, this is also becoming a greater problem throughout Asia as well, isn't it not?
Yeah, the timing of the arrival, if you will, of PM 2.5 coincided with the fact that everybody is into SNS, social networks, and the internet, and the mobile internet and stuff. So news and all these information is so readily available.
I mean, but when I remember, even me, myself, back 10 years ago, when I came to Korea when I was younger, I don't remember the air being this cloudy or this hazy before. Is it not something anecdotally we can see as well?
Well, again, that's very difficult to answer because the averages have come down. Now, again, like I said, we haven't officially started measuring PM 2.5 since 2015, but you're talking about years before that. The PM10 is another sort of factor that you can sort of gauge at, and those averages have come down. Again, annual average is something that we don't feel, okay, because it's an annual average. It's 365-day average. The daily episodes is what we're looking at, okay? But when we are not aware of PM 2.5 as a problem, you look at hazy air, some of the people think it's fog, some of the people think it's very cloudy. Now we all know that it's PM 2.5 pollution. So I think the awareness factor is something that is playing into this. Also, the fact that people demand a lot more cleaner air and healthier air than before. So those kind of things factor into it. The science shows that the averages have come down, but again, the episodes are still very significantly abundant. Yeah, they're still occurring a lot. Yeah.
Very briefly, do you think there's hope for a solution?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a lot of work that has been done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but the attitude of the government, the international community helping us, I think we can solve this in a few years.
Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you.